Welcome to Praxis, a podcast where we explore how to practice and embody the way of Jesus in our everyday lives. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen. We're in a series right now focused on our mental models for missional discipleship, a framework for living out our faith as disciples of Jesus in everyday life. Whether we're aware of it or not, we all have mental models, deep convictions and assumptions that shape how we see and take action in the world. Mental models are kind of like prescription lenses. While often invisible when wearing them, they consistently shape the way we think, feel, and act. So what were the mental models Jesus lived by? What convictions shaped how Jesus saw people, responded to needs, formed disciples, and joined God's mission in the world? That's what this series is all about. Each week, we're unpacking a key conviction that shaped Jesus' way of life and explore how it can shape ours too, as we seek to be a community of disciples living on mission in the way of Jesus. And today, we're going to look at another core conviction, and it's this: trust leads and effort follows. Let's do it.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Katie.
I'm Josiah.
And I'm Mac.
So it's kind of starting to feel like fall this week. I feel like this is a common conversation starter right now.
It's still too hot.
Yeah, it's a little warm.
It's fall, y'all.
It's fall, y'all. Hashtag PSL. Do you guys know that reference? Pumpkin spice latte. I do really like pumpkin spice lattes. The thing I'm most excited about for fall is apple cider donuts. So we go to this place to go apple picking called Peck and Bushel. It's like an apple orchard, maybe 30 minutes or so from here. And we've gone every year for a number of years, and they have the best apple cider donuts. And I need to go get one.
Good.
I don't think I've ever had an apple cider donut.
You're missing out.
You probably have.
You think so?
You've never... Really?
I don't think so. I can't think of a time where I've ever... And I love donuts.
Okay, well, have you had a pumpkin spice latte?
I'm not into those.
Have you tried one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm wondering if when you go to this place and procure a delicious apple cider donut, if you could bring one back for me.
I could.
Will you?
Yes.
I always make an apple cider bundt cake.
Oh, wow.
It's one of my favorite things that I make and makes me look forward to this time of year all the time.
Should make
So
some
maybe I'll
extra.
bring that in.
Yeah, bring it in.
I would love that, Adam.
Wow. So many treats.
Anything else that you guys are excited about for fall?
Oh, I love cool, crisp mornings. I just love them.
Yeah, I'm done with the heat.
Yeah.
I want to feel cold when I walk outside. I'm excited for it. For sure.
Speaking of apple cider, I was having a little bit of acid reflux, and Josie.
Join the club.
Oh yeah, and Josie was like, "Oh, she's been doing this for years. She drinks a little bit of
Apple cider vinegar?
yeah in the morning. She mixes it with water, and so she's like, you need to start doing this. And so for about 3 weeks now, I've been starting my day with.
Do you feel like it makes a difference?
It does make a difference, but it is the absolute worst way to start your day. Nothing is worse than that taste in
You
your
should
mouth.
get the gummies. They have apple cider
should do
vinegar
that.
gummies, and they're actually good.
I don't think the gummies do the same thing.
No.
I
think
don't know.
Gummies are kind of...
But I'm just saying, it is so gross.
Dude, I tried doing that for a long time. So especially if you fast in the morning and don't eat breakfast.
Which
it's
I do.
It's supposed to be really good. Supposed to. And if they see me if you could see me at home, I'm holding up air quotes. Supposed to do all these things. I don't know. I tried it. And I did it for a long time. And there was one morning I did it and I gagged so bad.
Yes.
I am done. It's so gross. I don't know if I notice enough of the effects. I can't do it anymore.
Well, I haven't given up yet, but I'm just kind of venting out loud. I don't know, new part of my routine I really loathe. Like, I don't like it. It's horrible.
Do you take a shot of apple cider vinegar while cold plunging?
No.
I think my bundt cake has similar effects to your health. So maybe we could just swap
There
that.
you go.
Yeah, if I could just take a bite of bundt cake rather than chug some apple cider vinegar.
Before I fast for the morning.
Well, speaking of acid reflux,
GERD, also known as GERD.
We're in a series focused on our mental models for missional discipleship. This is a framework for living out our faith and living our lives as disciples of Jesus. So each week we're exploring some of our core convictions or axiomatic truths that anchor us and guide us as we go about being a community of disciples who live on mission in the way of Jesus. We've covered a handful of these already. God's presence precedes our participation. God bends or stoops to meet us in reality. God is like Jesus. And then at our last episode, we talked about how God's kingdom looks like Jesus's ministry. And I think one of the key things we keep emphasizing is these aren't just our convictions. This is our attempt to sort of name, here are the lenses through which Jesus saw things that then shaped how he engaged the world and made disciples. Today, we want to unpack another missional axiom, another core conviction, and it's this: trust leads and effort follows. Trust leads and effort follows. Now, when we say this, we're trying to get at how people actually grow and learn to participate in God's mission. Trust is the starting point. Trust in God's character, trust in God's faithfulness, trust that God is always present at work. Trust is the engine that drives our growth and participation in what God is doing. And when trust is present, effort then naturally follows, naturally flows from that. And this is not an effort driven by self-reliance or self-dependence, but an effort that is grace-guided, spirit-infused, and faith-filled. The rub, though, is that, and we're going to get into this today, is that we often flip this, don't we? Rather than trust leading and our effort following, we often lead out with our effort as if everything depends on us. And so instead of receiving God's grace as a gift, we try to earn it through performance. Instead of resting and receiving God's love, we rely on accomplishing and achieving things to prove that we're lovable. Instead of trusting God's promises, we attempt to secure God's blessings through striving. Instead of embracing God's acceptance of us, we hustle and attempt to gain it from him. So there's this displacement of responsibility. It's all on us, and the truth is it's not, right? So we flip this with effort first and trust maybe following. And this just isn't the way. I think we want to say this isn't the way God designed us. So we want to flip the flip. We want to reverse this by saying, look, no, trust comes first, and then our effort follows.
Yeah, I think that can't be stated strongly enough. As Katie and I are both, well, actually, you're done now, but leading some longer discipleship groups that they last a whole year long. And
Katie's done with discipleship.
Yeah, she's done with it.
I've mastered it.
Yeah, but this is sort of the primary work of our personal discipleship, is learning to accept who we are and accept our identity from Jesus rather than trying to prove it. And I would say it's sort of the root issue, the root of most of our issues comes from flipping this around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Bringing it back to those leadership intensives, those year-long groups that we teach, you're right. So much of what bubbles up in those groups is this question of, do I have to prove my worth?
Yeah.
And am I out ahead of God, trying to constantly sort of do things to prove who I am and to build my identity, or is my identity rooted in him? And I'm excited to get into that.
Yeah.
Well, let's do that because, again, this is something I think Jesus believed and pivoted out of. So maybe we could just start there. If we're naming that trust comes first, then effort follows, how do we even see this showing up in Jesus's life and ministry? Where do you guys see or notice that?
Yeah, well, I think the first spot we should stop is when Jesus is baptized. I think this displays how Jesus's entire ministry flowed from his identity. If you remember the baptism moment, he's baptized, the clouds open, the Father said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." Before any miracles, before Jesus achieved anything that he had set out to do, the Father gave him his approval. And that sort of becomes the catalyst for now. Jesus isn't striving and he's not hustling to hear all the accolades and the admiration from the Father or anyone really, because he gets to know who he is beforehand. And so he knew who he was before he had to do a thing to prove it. So it's a super important point to make right at the top that everything Jesus did flowed from a place of identity. He knew who he was well before he had to do anything to prove it.
So I think I hear you naming or describing and drawing attention to the sequence of things, that the baptism and that clear affirmation of Jesus's identity came before Jesus's public ministry, and that feels significant.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also leads to what was next is when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. So he's tempted to be Jesus was tempted to accept other methods of accomplishing the Father's will and to identify with different things than who he was. But Jesus didn't take the bait. And I think that sets us up for what it looks like. Okay, how did Jesus embody this? Well, the first thing was things happened in the right order. Mm-hmm. Jesus was able to receive who he was, apart from anything he had done to accomplish or earn anything. And then he was able to set out and do the ministry he was called to do after that.
There's a similar order in all the epistles too. In other words, when Paul is writing to these churches, you'll notice a pattern in many of the letters. Romans, Colossians would be another one, Ephesians. The first chunk of the letter is devoted to explaining the gospel, like the good news of God's grace made available in and through Jesus. Mm-hmm. In Romans, it literally goes on for 11 chapters and ends with a doxology, like praising God for all that God has done in and through Jesus. It's only after that then Paul shifts gears and begins like kind of applying, in light of this, then how are we supposed to live? Mm-hmm. Like, Romans 12, therefore be renewed by the transforming of your mind. That comes right after like a long description of what God has done in and through Jesus. Same thing in Ephesians and Colossians, the first few chapters devoted to explaining the gospel. Therefore, then, live in a manner worthy to which you have been called. And so even in, I guess, Paul's writings, it seems like he's intuiting or, getting this order correct, that it starts with grace, the grace of God available through Jesus. And then out of that, we're to live into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. And it's really cool that we have Jesus as the example of like someone who did that first. He did that perfectly. Like even Jesus wasn't proving his worth. Even Jesus received his identity from God before he did things. And I think we see this throughout his life, like you said, Josiah. John 5:19 says, very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees the Father doing. Because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. So yeah, I love this picture of Jesus, like not hustling to make things happen, not trying to impress anyone. He's simply like watching what the Father is doing, and then he's joining in. And when I think about that image of like, what is God doing? And then how do I join? That posture completely shifts how I think about my own life with God. Like it reminds me that God's the initiator. I'm not the one carrying the weight of making things happening for him. I'm invited to do things with him. Again, back to my tattoo that I referenced in our last episode. Like we're partakers of the divine nature.
The Times New Roman, Greek.
The Google Translate font. But again, what it says in Greek is partakers in the divine nature. That's what this is. That's why I chose that. It's because it's a central idea that God is doing things at all times, and we're constantly to be looking at that and then going, how do I join in? And honestly, I need that reminder daily because my default is always to run ahead with my own plans. Mm-hmm. So it's really cool to look at Jesus and go, he did this and he gave us the perfect example.
Yeah. And again, the temptation, as you're describing, is just to do the exact opposite and including for pastors and those in ministry. I mean, maybe especially so, because many pastors, I think, go into ministry without an identity. And then they wrap their identity right around their ministry, and it just does really bad work, right? Oh, yeah. Because then their role as pastor gets intertwined with their identity, and the two sort of get fused together. This is why, and maybe this is a little bit of a joke, but I really don't like when people call me Pastor Mac. I just don't like it because it almost feels like some of that fusion. I think many people say it out of like a term of respect or like, so I get the intention behind it. Yeah. But part of me is like, well, we don't do this with almost any other profession. I mean, I know there's like, Dr. So-and-so or whatever, but I don't go, hey, Nurse Josie or, Accountant Frank, or like, we don't do that.
I do it with plumbers though.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
The only thing I can think of when you said is Plumber Joe. Wasn't that like a political?
That's exactly what came to mind for me
Okay,
too.
God, I'm not alone.
Well, you can't serve well. You can't serve other people well if you're needing something from them in order to get your identity needs met, right?
You should say that again.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't think you can serve people well with self-sacrificial love if you are relying on them to get some of your own identity needs met. And I mean, there was a book that kind of pinged me in the forehead. This was by Robert Mulholland Jr. He wrote a book called The Deeper Journey. And the first chapter is devoted to your false self, which is who we are apart from the identity God wants to give us. Like all of our hustle and our attempts to like build something out of ourselves, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps so we can feel good about who we are, right? And then the second chapter, and you're kind of like, you read the first chapter, you're like, oh crap, like I do some of this stuff. It's not great. And then you get to the second chapter, which is entitled The Religious False Self. Uh-huh. And he goes, hey, do you want to know the difference between the false self and the religious false self? And then he answers it. He goes, you've brought God into it. So now you're still building a false self. You're just doing it with all this like religious pretense. You're doing it in the name of God. And this is exactly, you guys, what's happening in so many churches is pastors take positions. They're not operating out of what we see Jesus doing, a full sense of God's grace and receiving their identity, which is secure and firm, but out of their own anxiety and having no secure attachment to an identity from God, they try to build it. And they're just doing it in God's name so it looks really good. But in fact, it's no different than the false self that maybe a non-religious person is building. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it feels really significant to me to go back to what you were naming, Josiah, that Jesus received his identity, was secure in that identity, and even passed identity tests in the wilderness before he stepped out and tried to do anything with or for God in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an unfortunate reality that is not necessarily how we train our pastors and ministers.
Yeah, right.
Forcing them to pass identity tests before we hand them ministry opportunities.
Right. And then, Katie, I think you said something really insightful, which is this is why later on when Jesus is in his public ministry, you don't see him doing anything apart from his Father. It's almost like the identity he received and had internalized gave him a non-anxious presence not to have to do things apart from God. He was just able to be at ease and rest in and do whatever was being asked of him in the moment. And of course, the counter of that we see throughout the scriptures. You regularly see people who, out of their anxiety or a lack of identity, start doing things rather than waiting on God. Like Abraham and Sarah, out of their anxiety, they try to fulfill God's promise, and Abraham ends up boinking Hagar. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I'll fulfill this promise, right? It's ridiculous. Israel, out of their anxiety.
Which word will he go with?
Well, that's why I laughed, because I was waiting. I was like, what is he going to say? He ends up, and I'm like, because I was like, they end up having a child. No, he went with the cause, not the effect. I think we should leave it in.
Don't start over. Fine. Leave it in.
I think you should just leave it all in. I think that's fine.
Okay.
Can that be one of the buttons?
Yeah.
Just
leave it in.
Boinking.
Just leave it in. Do we have any buttons? Good.
Practice podcast.
It's really waiting for that Eminem button.
We need so many more buttons.
I really want the Eminem button.
Yeah.
I listened to that song this past weekend.
All right, I'm mandating that you complete that task by next. That's a direct order.
Yes, Pastor Mac.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right. We see people regularly pivoting out of their anxiety and a lack of identity, and then doing things apart from God. Like Abraham and Sarah, out of their anxiety, they try to fulfill God's promise with Hagar, which isn't what God wanted them to do. The Israelites, out of their anxiety of Moses being on top of the mountain for so long, construct a golden calf. Saul, out of his anxiety of Samuel not showing up, offers a sacrifice on his own. King David, out of his own anxiety, takes a census. So many examples of people, rather than resting in who they are as God's beloved children, trusting in his activity, they get anxious, and then they try to do things on their own to make things happen. And Jesus just, as you pointed out, Katie, I think consistently refuses to do the same. Sort of reminds me of this. Maybe an image would help that gets at this point of like when images. My dad and I grew up hunting together, and we, in the past, 15, 20 years, we've had a couple dogs that are wired hair pointing Griffons. They're pointers. These are bird dogs. So you go hunting for pheasant or grouse, and they're trained to kind of scent the bird and then freeze and not move a muscle so they don't scare it away. And then you kind of are the one who goes up to startle the bird and so on. That's the way it's supposed to work. But you have to train them to get them to that level of cooperation, right? And I remember early on with our most recent dog, his name is Buckley, we would let him out, and he'd be so excited that he wouldn't stay close or even point. He'd be 50 yards ahead, scaring the birds away. You know what I mean? And I remember God kind of giving me that image in a prayer time, hey, some of the things you're wanting to do, I want to, and yet you're 50 yards ahead of me. Slow down, trust me, we have to work in tandem. This doesn't work when you're 50 yards ahead or even lagging behind. We have to be in step with one another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that image, because in that image, there are things that you can see that the dog doesn't see.
Yes.
And yet he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And isn't that the same with us? There are so many variables and things going on behind the scenes, whether it's, spiritual forces at work or our own stuff that God wants to do in us first before we do the quote unquote thing for him. I can't tell you how many times maybe that's happened in my life where it's yes, that's a good thing, but God maybe wants to do something in me first before I do that thing. And we somehow forget that God sees the whole landscape, and we see a teeny tiny part of that.
Have I ever told you the story of Tig's baptism?
No.
This was a couple years ago. He, on his own initiative, was hey, I want to get baptized. And, he's in middle school. So I'm okay, that's fine. And so we did it, but he didn't want to do it here at the church. He really wanted it to be a smaller thing at my parents' house. They live on a lake surrounded by people who really know him and have invested in him. So we did it at the lake, and I was the one who baptized him. And after he was baptized, people were kind of video recording the moment and taking pictures. And someone came up to me and showed me a picture, and just as he was coming up out of the water, some sort of bird went right over us and was caught in the picture. I don't think it was a dove, but it was just kind of this cool moment. Yeah. It was just this cool moment to go, as silly as it is. The Spirit was present in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's what also I think is significant, Josiah, you bringing up Jesus's baptism, is it wasn't just a confirmation of his identity. It was also the Spirit was present. Mm-hmm. And then from that moment on, you see Jesus, there's regular attention in the Gospels being given to the fact that Jesus was operating out of full dependence on the Spirit, including his next move, which was to go into the wilderness. He was led into the wilderness by the Spirit. Yeah. And then coming out of the wilderness, the authors say he returned to Galilee to launch his public ministry, quote unquote, full of the Spirit. Mm. And so when we're operating out of a place of reception, receiving our identity and receiving the power of the Holy Spirit, we also won't get ahead, like you were talking about, Katie, but we'll be able to, whatever we're doing, we'll do in full dependence on God. Mm-hmm. And you regularly see Jesus doing this. When he selects the 12 disciples, he spends an entire night in prayer before doing so. And when the disciples couldn't cast out a demon and he shows up, he names, hey, some of these can't be cast out without prayer and fasting an indictment because you're trying to do it in your own strength and power. You know what I mean? So I guess what I'm saying is this whole thing of Jesus starting with his identity and receiving really fuels his entire ministry. He's not getting out ahead, and whatever he's not doing in his own strength.
And if Jesus operates that way, how much more are we to operate, right? Jesus was literally God in the flesh.
Yes. And so it's crazy that our default is often the exact opposite. Like, to draw attention to the point you just made, Katie. Like, my goodness, here's God in the flesh, and he's doing these things. Jesus is doing these things. And we, who are clearly not God in the flesh, why is it then that we reverse this almost every day of our lives? So why don't we speak to this? Like, why is this such a strong tendency for us to, instead of start with trust and then go to effort, we flip this and begin with effort and maybe eventually get to trust?
Yeah. Well, I kind of think in some ways this is the cultural water we swim in, This is sort of the essence of, in many ways, the essence of American culture. Like, there's this unspoken rule that you work harder, prove yourself, keep climbing, and, you'll find success. And underneath that is this assumption that it's all on you. And I feel that all the time, you guys, like as a parent, in ministry, every time you look on social media, there's like this subtle message that your worth comes from how well you're performing. There's all these different life hacks. There's all these ways to better your life or fit more in or have more well-adjusted kids or a cleaner house or like whatever. And so especially in this era of technology, it feels like the goalpost is always moving kind of 10 feet ahead, and you're constantly hustling to keep up, and you're constantly seeing more and more that you should be doing. And I think it really pervades more than we're even aware of in this culture.
Yeah, there seems to be like an identity displacement that's happening in our culture. What do you do is often the first question people are asked. If you're meeting someone at a party or a gathering, it's like, hey, nice to meet you. So what do you do? Like, what does that reveal about what we value and what we care about in our culture and what we celebrate? I mean, this is the hallmark. Like, think about how many movies are like Rocky 1, Rocky 2, Rocky. We love these movies because they're people who are working hard and putting in a ton of effort to overcome obstacles and then become something, achieve something great.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's not to say that we don't want to achieve great things in some ways. Like we do, but when our effort is the thing that's leading us, we risk doing the thing that God isn't doing. And we risk doing it apart from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sort of elevate this idea of self-sufficiency, which is really good and laudable in many ways in work ethic. But I think what we're saying is there's a shadow side, which can easily lead to this core belief that my worth is tied up in what I do and what I accomplish. I see that.
I have this really controversial opinion about Rudy Rudiger. My dad went to Notre Dame, and I think they overlapped at some point while they were
really?
there. Yeah.
That's a cool.
But that's one of those stories that's sort of like celebrated of like hard work and motivation and blah, 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 blah. And I just see it so different. Often in light of this, like, think about all the guys who had to work a fraction, they put a fraction of effort in and actually played every game. Because they actually knew like, oh, who I am. Like, this, you know what I mean? Like, I was given
They contributed on a daily basis, not just for one play.
Right, right. And he worked so hard against his, I don't know, kind of his identity, his body type, all of that to have like this one moment. I don't know. That's the way I see it.
It's really interesting. I would not have.
You're gonna get me going. That's actually really interesting. He's like a hero, but
kind of a sad
we are
one.
gonna step on some like core beliefs, like preciously held beliefs, if you try to say that Rudy wasn't a hero. But I think that is really interesting that he spent so much time trying to do something he wasn't, be something
intrinsically
he wasn't.
very good at.
Yeah,
right.
To have one moment of glory,
right.
And
sorry to throw us off.
Well, so Alex and I recently watched the Aaron Rodgers documentary and the Brett Favre documentary, and you kind of see this as a thread looping through these like professional football football players or really any professional athlete, like they get so wrapped up in their identity that then when they're done playing, they kind of go a little nuts.
They have no idea what to do.
They have no idea who they are. And there's just like this profound emptiness. And some people are more honest about it than others. You know, Johnny Cash wrote a song about this at the end of his career. Like people that have these talents or these skills that just are praised over and over, you just see how that becomes innate in their identity. And then when they don't have it anymore, they're just lost.
Yeah, and let's not just pretend that it's like athletes, because it's also pastors. If you wrap your identity around your ministry, I know pastors who refuse to retire or don't because they don't know who they'd be without it.
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to your dad. Your dad just finished how many years of ministry?
Well, the church it's their 40th anniversary since it started. Wow. So he was doing it before then too.
But retired this month, and that's just super neat. That's super neat to have served a community for that long faithfully. But there is something to that, to go, oh, my identity isn't determined by what I do in this space. I can, step aside and empower other people and all of that good stuff. We often think that this is just we often think we can see this in the culture, but here's the thing, you guys, is that the church, like it or not, often mimics our surrounding culture.
Yeah, don't think that those cultural waters haven't leaked their way into our churches. I think that we like to use, in church, we use language that allows us to bless our efforts in the name of God, but really it's still our efforts to try to do something that we have determined is the thing we're supposed to be doing, right? How often do we ask God to bless the thing we are going to do before really trying to identify what it is that we're doing and making sure that it is in step with the Spirit?
Like the cultural water that people are drinking out there has somehow gotten into our church bubblers. We're sipping it too. I remember years ago when Jim Collins wrote that book, Good to Great. In that book, he talks about BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like all of a sudden all the church, all pastors are talking about like, we got to come up with some BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, and get some vision and momentum around it. And I'm just like, really? Like, again, if you're part of our church, you know this, but the way we go about being the church is not us as a staff, or Matt goes up on a Mount Olympia in Oconomowoc and comes back with some BHAGs for our church to get excited about. Like, you know what I mean? Isn't that what it's called, Mount Olympia?
Yeah, I know. That's funny.
Olympia.
Yeah. Mount Olympia is a strong word.
Yeah, that
garbage
is
dump.
Garbage dump. But you get what I'm saying? Like, it's like we're coming up with great things we could do for God that really are about boosting our own ego rather than just starting with what is God doing.
Yeah. I will name that it is difficult to identify, and that's sort of the sinister nature of how this stuff has impacted our church cultures from the outside culture. Is how are you supposed to fault someone for having a big goal of reaching a lot of people? Mm-hmm. Right? Like on paper, it's like, oh, how wonderful. Like you just want to save a lot of people, or you want to reach a lot of people, or you want to feed a lot of people. You have all these like big goals, and they're stamped with, like I said, language and efforts that will in turn help people. So how are you supposed to call attention to some ulterior motives? But I think that it's worth naming, and it's important for us to name that often these types of efforts are driven from our own internal drives to try to like be something that we're either not, or we're doing it regardless of how God feels about it.
Yeah,
or what God is doing.
Right. It's almost like we make an idol out of spiritual impact.
Yeah.
For God.
And that's really difficult to identify when you're in it, because how are you supposed to question someone's motive if they're trying to help people?
Right. Well, our hunting dog was sincerely motivated to get birds.
Yes.
But he couldn't do it on his own. He just scared him away.
So what's the risk then? If this is what we're doing, we're flipping the script and we're putting the cart before the horse. Mm-hmm. then to play devil's advocate here, like if we're still reaching people, then is it really that big of a deal? If our effort is producing results, then what's the risk? If the results are helping people and having a bigger church and reaching lots of people, then why do we need to correct it?
I feel like the word results raises a lot of questions for me, right? Like sometimes we think we're seeing results and there's more going on behind the scenes. I think sometimes kingdom fruit isn't always immediately evident, Like I just spent a year again walking with a group of 5 women, and someone might look at that and go, wow, you take that hour and a half every week and you only spent it on 5 women. You could have done a lot more than that and had a bigger quote unquote impact. But there's something that happens when you just kind of go where God is leading and you're faithful and you kind of leave the results to him. Just my thought.
Yeah, we need to measure what matters. And I think like Katie, when you say, hey, the word results, I have all kinds of questions about what kind of results are you referring to? And quite frankly, I feel less need to speak to how the results that historically are celebrated really aren't doing what they think. There's just been so much research and study to show that, like, hey, us quote unquote reaching people isn't actually helping them become disciples who are mature in Jesus. The ultimate thing we need to measure is character.
Yeah.
That's what kingdom fruit is all about, is actually becoming the kind of people who look and love like Jesus and do his teachings. And if we're measuring anything other than that and holding up as a success, then we're not being faithful to the way of Jesus. We've sort of co-opted the traditional metrics of the megachurch mentality that's about budgets, bigger buildings, and more butts in the seat.
I thought you were going to say bigger butts.
Bigger butts.
That too.
Yeah, I agree with you all. I was naming it as like, I wonder if someone would think that.
You're just being the devil.
I thought we were teaching you.
Yeah.
Yeah, changing the metrics matters. And I don't know about you guys, but I think it's really easy to fall prey to some of these ways of seeing how our effort matters and how it matters more than trying to be in step with the Spirit, because it's really tempting to use these metrics as a measurement of if we're doing a good job or not. Like, how many people are coming to church, how many salvations, how many this, how many that. You have all these different metrics and you're using them, and it's really easy to get your worth and value as a church leader from those metrics.
Oh, totally. I heard this term recently, pastorpreneur.
It's funny.
And that, like, for me, honestly, it sort of captures what I think a lot of pastors feel in terms of external pressure, that you're supposed to be like a pastorpreneur who is like, being innovative and cutting edge and building something new that's becoming increasingly successful and building a brand for, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And my goodness, that just, to me, does really bad work. So instead of just focusing out there, here's where we see this problem. I feel acutely aware of this tension almost every day. And Katie, you alluded to this as well. Mm-hmm. Let's unpack that a little bit. Where do you guys feel this flip of effort first, trust maybe later, versus trust first and then effort following?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's most obvious to me in the workplace, because it's like the moment I sit down at my computer in the morning, it's like I have all these different things that I could put effort into, and I should do this and I should do that. And for me, it feels good to get things done. I think I've told you guys, I use some like task manager app, and I got like the master of productivity.
Yeah.
I don't know. And that's kind of
my
joke anyways. Yeah. In the office, but I love to feel productive. And so even the small moment, like before I dive into work or before I dive into a task, just to pause and say, okay, God, where do you want me to put my best energy today? How do you want me to sort of tackle all the things that are in front of me? Like, that can feel small, but it's been a little practice for me of going, okay, God, you're out ahead of me in this work. And yes, I'm going to be expending effort and using my brain and doing all these things, but help me to follow your lead in how I'm orienting to all this. Another example is just with my family. So just a couple weeks ago, you guys, we try to practice Sabbath Friday nights. We go through seasons where more committed, and seasons where it falls off a little bit. But we had a really busy week. I was really excited to practice the Sabbath with my family, and it like totally fell apart. Like, I don't know. It was a Friday night. Alex had to go somewhere, got home late, so we started late. Then I had like some things I wanted to do to kind of set the rhythm for it. The kids were crabby and arguing, and I just got so frustrated. Like, okay, I am trying to like instill this important Jesus-looking practice with my family, and it looks nothing like Jesus, and this isn't going anywhere, and this isn't the image of like holding hands and saying what we're grateful for and talking about Bible stories or whatever I had in my mind.
Tell me more about what you had.
It doesn't sound nice at all.
Where I'm going with that is even in that moment, like the setback of saying, hey, I was really trying to do something good here, and I put effort into setting our family up to have a Sabbath night. You know, I thought ahead about things that we could do. But even in that moment where I was trying for a quote unquote laudable goal, the setback, I think, offered me an opportunity to go, okay, I'm expending a whole lot of effort. This isn't all going the way I want it to, even though I think it would be really good for our family. God, I'm feeling really crabby. Show me where you're at work. I'm just, you know what I mean? There's a lot happening that's outside of my control. Show me where you're at work in the middle of this dumpster fire and how I can join your work in my kids' lives and my husband's life and my family's life, even though it's not at all going the way I want it to. So like in that moment, I had a choice to double down in my effort or to sort of take my foot off the gas and sort of choose to trust God in that moment. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Makes total sense. And how would you describe, if we could go back into that moment, when did you realize, oh, my effort is I'm kind of I'm trying to force something here versus like kind of slowing down and getting present to God? Because that seems to be like a key moment.
Yeah. I noticed myself being really crabby. Like we had a really busy week, and I really wanted this just like connection time as a family. And it wasn't happening, and people were just crabby with each other. And I just noticed myself being really disappointed and really crabby. And then I just had a check of like, okay, and how am I going to be present the rest of the night in light of that?
I just got done with a call with my spiritual director. And he always starts it we start in prayer, and then he says, what do you want to bring today? And I brought up kind of what we're talking about here. I just said, my life feels so full. It's fast paced right now. And then I talked about Dallas Willard's quote to John Ortberg, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life, for hurry is a great enemy of spiritual formation. And I was like, I feel like I have a voice on like one shoulder being like, you're going too fast, shame on you. And yet I don't think that can change right now. And part of me doesn't feel guilty about it. And then I considered Jesus, and he had like a lot of full days that were really productive, you know? So we started talking about this, that like maybe we need to parse out, when is hurry bad? And just instead of assuming it's all bad, or when is fullness bad? Mm-hmm. And part of kind of where we landed was that it becomes negative when it interrupts our connection with Jesus, and or when our character starts to leak out sideways. Like we begin to become reactive. And the key is to notice when we're disturbed, when there's some sort of disturbance, not just outside of us, but in us. And I just thought it was such a helpful conversation for me this morning, because I'm realizing, okay, yes, there are times when like I have a full day, and I felt like I was like in the flow with the Holy Spirit the entire day, doing what God had put before me. The pace wasn't exactly the problem. But there are other times, like there's a dumpster fire at home and you're trying to create a Sabbath of peace, and you're like banging your head against the wall. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I'm really crabby. And those are the moments to kind of take the foot off the accelerator, slow down, and attend to our identity, attend to what God is doing, and get recentered. Mm-hmm. I just think that's such a perfect example.
Yeah. No, it is true. Sometimes we live out of this belief that my effort will produce a certain amount of output. Like if I give X amount of output units, it's going to equal a certain amount of productivity. Mm-hmm. It's going to produce something. And I think it sounds like what we're naming is learning to a lot. Like it's not necessarily the pace of life in which you're in. It's more about where your effort is going, and being able to learn your like identity and trust in God first allows us to align our efforts in things that are actually going to produce the type of kingdom results that actually matter. And sometimes our hustle and our push, it creates the frustration because we're met without the results that we were subconsciously expecting to come back on us.
My first formation, you guys, totally works against this default of like this way God designed it to be, which is to receive first, then followed by trust-filled effort. I grew up in a family, and much of this is good. It's not bad, but like just I have all these little phrases in my mind that were instilled on me, emphasizing hard work and not quitting or giving up. You know, do today what others don't do so you can do tomorrow what others can't do. My dad would often tell me, like, you're to be the first one on the ice for hockey and the last one to get off every time. You know what I mean? It was just like this, you don't quit. You're always more effort, always try harder. A couple days ago on Tuesday, I was doing a workout, and it involved some 400-meter runs, and it had just rained. So I'm running outside, and this guy is on an electric bike, and he was going way too fast, tries to take a turn, and wipes out, like kind of sideways. And it was fine, but he didn't like hit his head or anything like that. But he got up kind of slowly. I stopped. I was like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "I think so." And then he just kind of like stood there for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, just kind of regathering himself. And I had this moment I started my workout after I knew he was okay, kind of continued my workout. But I had this realization, if that were me, I wouldn't have paused. I would have picked up the bike, got right back on it, and kept going. You know? And I just had this realization that, like, this is not good. Like, that is not a good thing to have your default to be. Yeah. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And so I feel almost in every area of life, you guys, this tension of starting with effort rather than reception.
Yeah.
Even in my time with Jesus, there's this desire to make something happen, to manufacture a moment rather than just like, out of all places, to sit and receive. Every day, Katie, I feel that tension of looking at my to-do list and feeling like it's actually counterproductive to pause and start with prayer, even though I know it's not. Yeah. You know, relational stuff. How often in your marriage or with parenting do you notice a problem and oh my goodness, like the default is to try to jump in and fix it or to solve it, to try to alleviate the anxiety. Preaching, you guys, every week, every time I prepare a message, it's like, okay, how much effort? Where is my effort going? Am I cooperating with God? Some of the messages that I think have been the most powerful have been when I felt least prepared. And that's not an excuse for not preparing. I've had plenty that go well because I prepare. But again, it just highlights this. How much of this am I owning as if it's all on me versus learning how to like operate with trust and reception being the starting point. I feel this everywhere. Oh, yeah.
I feel it, leading worship from stage. A few different ways. One is it's tempting to want to make like, hey, if I push more and if I get the perfect songs and if we get the right band and the right music and get the right arrangement,
then Jesus will return.
then people are going to experience something bigger. But that's a temptation because one, it's also like it implies that I can somehow usher in what God wants to do, that his hands are tied until I pick the right song. It seems kind of silly. It also has the negative flip side, which is when people don't respond, now I feel like a failure. And in reality, if I am faithful to Jesus and I put out there what I'm asked to do, and I do that in service to Jesus and working with him, and people choose to not respond in worship or in kind towards God's activity, it says way more about them than it does about me.
Yeah, just blame it on their hard-heartedness.
Yeah.
Just teasing.
Count the number of hands in the air, and that's how good of a job you've done.
Or it also has the effect of you get up there and there's not as many people in the seats, and somehow you're tempted to think it's less significant, right? Because it's less, should I put in less effort here because not as many people are here, and I won't get the same type of feedback from singing and worshiping. And so there's lots of temptations. They're like all over the place.
So in light of that, these temptations are everywhere. What does leading with trust and following with effort do? Like if we can learn how to embrace the way of Jesus here, what does it actually do for us?
We've talked about identity a couple times already, and I think, that comes to mind. Leading with trust roots us in our identity, just like Jesus was rooted in his identity before he went out and did anything. When I start with trust, I remember who I am apart from what I do, which means my identity isn't riding on my accomplishments or my failures. It's secure in who I am as a child of God. Like, that's it. My accomplishments don't hold the power to determine my value or worth. I'm not on this roller coaster of like, oh, I did something really well. I feel like that sermon went across really good. Like, awesome. So I'm like up here, and then all of a sudden, that kind of stunk, and now I'm down here, right? Like, it sort of roots us in that place.
I got 5 compliments in the foyer after my message.
Right. Yeah. It's more
and
like
now
an
I'm
anchor.
doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then next time someone gets mad at you, which has happened to me, and now I'm in the dumps.
Yep.
So it kind of gets you off the identity roller coaster, and gives you a place of rootedness and sort of consistency to land on.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, I grabbed a list of all like kind of characteristics or verses that pointed to who you are in Christ. So things like you're a new creation, or God delights in you, that you're adopted, you're forgiven, you're righteous. Like you can Google it and you'll find a list of 20 some things that point to your secure identity because of Jesus. And I remember for the better part of a year, slowly just working through each one, like not just memorizing the verses associated with it, but trying to internalize it. Mm-hmm. How do I experience this as true? Jesus, if this is who I am in you, let me sit with you and receive this in a way that isn't just in my head, but becomes part of my settled disposition. And it was really formative for me. It was such a good, honestly, as I'm talking a lot, I probably should go back to that again and do it again, Yeah. It was so good.
Yeah, I also think trust clarifies where our efforts should go. So trust, it's sort of, it connects us to a foundation that isn't made of sand. And that brings about a lot of benefits. Like if our efforts apart from God's activity, they have shaky and temporary type of results. But when we start with trust and identity, we can operate out of principles and conviction rather than just focusing efforts where we get the most results.
Yeah, imagine if Jesus hadn't prayed for the entire night before he chose the 12, just sort of did it haphazardly. And then invested all of his 3 years of energy into the wrong people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think of like, okay, so every year as a staff in January, we kind of create some balcony space to go, where are we and what does God want us to focus on this year? And then that sets up our effort, our staff time effort for the rest of the year. And that's been a really good practice for us. There's a really scary passage in 1 Corinthians 3 where Paul talks about like, hey, some of you will be saved, but through fire. Like some of it is straw and it will be burned up. It really points to this reality that we can be putting our effort into things that won't last. And what makes it last is this where God wants me to be?
Yeah.
What else?
I also think this idea of trusting first sustains our efforts along the way. So think about like when I have this great idea and I'm like, I'm going to go do this thing. How often is it easy to get started with a ton of energy and excitement and, big plans, and then you hit a couple roadblocks or a setback and it's like, this isn't working the way I wanted it to. But when we're rooted in this idea of like trusting God and following his lead, I think that word sustaining really comes to mind. Like it keeps me from burning out because I know that outcome isn't ultimately on me. And if God is the one initiating it and leading it and out ahead of me, well, then he's going to sustain it along the way.
Oh, there have been so many times where I've wanted to call it quits, if I'm honest. Like, we've been through some tough stuff as a church. COVID, all that was 2020.
Yeah.
COVID, election year, racial tensions. It was not a fun time being a pastor, not at all. And what I've noticed is really what sustains me and helps me keep putting one foot in front of the other, particularly in those challenging moments, is that real sense of, hey, this is who you are. This is what I've called and gifted you to do. And you see that in the stories of Scripture. I mean, like some of the passages or stories where God calls a prophet, like Jeremiah. And of course, there's some resistance at first. He doesn't want to do it, but he's like, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. They don't step in. It just goes easy. Like they step into what God's asking them to do. And it's really hard. And that moment of receiving their identity as like a prophet and trusting themselves into God's care and that God goes with them is what sustains them through all the twists and turns along the way. So I think you're right that it sustains us. It encourages us to continue to persevere. Going back to something you said and similar, Josiah, not only does it, I think, focus our efforts, but it sort of it gives us the best possibility of fruitfulness. Like if we're putting our energy towards the things that God has put before us instead of our own BHAGs, and if we're doing it in a like spirit dependent way rather than pivoting out of self-reliance, out of a fullness of identity rather than some pathetic attempt to get an identity, well, our efforts are probably have the best chance of being fruitful because they're done in cooperation with God rather than our own efforts. I mean, there's that psalm that says, unless the Lord builds the house, the laborers labor in vain. That's kind of what I'm getting at, is like when we actually start with receiving and then our effort follows, we know we're not laboring in vain.
Yeah. Well, and then faithfulness becomes the measure of success rather than all the other things that can tempt us away from something else.
Which we can't control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Faithfulness becomes the measure of success. That's the question to be asking is, am I faithfully pursuing God's lead?
Faithfulness becoming the measure of our success brings so many benefits to following Jesus because, I mean, especially as like in church leadership, you're up on stage and especially for, I do something, I'm doing music and connecting in that way. It's like I said before, it's very easy to fall prey to the temptation to think that if I do it better, that it will produce more results. And there are so many variables to how other people show up in that type of space and what it looks like. And it's sobering, but also so helpful to walk into Sunday and be, I'm faithfully showing up to do what I sense God is inviting me to do, doing it well. And if I was faithful, I did it. And that's enough. And sort of like release the fruit bearing and everything else that needs to happen is like, if my job is to like figure out what it looks like to be faithful, to discern that in a community of other people who are doing it as well, and then do it. And then I can go home and feel good about that.
What's that serenity prayer? How does it go? Like, grant me the grace to...
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
I love that you read it from a graphic with swirly font.
It's the first thing that came up.
Something that looks like it'd be printed up in a kitchen somewhere.
There's obviously a lot of wisdom baked into that prayer, and I think it captures some of what you're getting at, Josiah, which is there is a real peace that comes when you focus on what you can focus on.
Yeah.
What you can change, and you give yourself to that with courage and faithfulness. But then you just rest and let go of the things that really aren't in your control, that you can't change. And knowing the difference between those two really brings about peace.
Yeah, trust produces peace. And it leads to a strength of conviction that isn't insecure. I've found that to be very true in my own life as you continue to focus on the identity piece, the trusting God piece, the all the other stuff is I can rest knowing that the work didn't start with me and it's not going to finish with me either. There's something that's actually very freeing to know that I'm not as important as I think I am.
Yes.
Right. And maybe some people need to hear that they're more important than they think they are. But sometimes for me, it's helpful to be like, my significance in the world is already predetermined because God loves me and has imparted to me an identity that's more valuable than anything I could earn. And so my job as I sit and be faithful and discern what it looks like to work with God and to understand who I am, gives me a confidence that I can't produce on my own. And that confidence really is a piece when it comes to leadership and being in a position where you could be getting it from something else. So it's a confidence in who God is, who I am, and that what I do is aligned with what He's doing.
Totally. I was in Indianapolis this past weekend doing some training alongside Trisha Taylor, and we were talking about her husband, who's a pastor. And he's probably nearing retirement, I would imagine, at some point. But we were in kind of like a mega church setting. It was a big church, and she was saying, my husband this is not like where he would feel at home. He said a long time ago at the very beginning, I'm a country doctor. Kind of a rural doctor. And I just thought, man, that's really neat that he knew right from the start, this is how I'm wired. This is the population I'm going to serve. And going back to the cultural piece, when there's so much pressure to be a big deal and how much peace he probably experiences just knowing this is where God's placed me and how God's wired me. I'm going to be faithful to that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been good, you guys.
That's good.
And now it is Praxis time.
Praxis podcast.
So, do you see how I've mastered that?
That was very smooth.
Thank you. So let's get into it. We always want to end with like some concrete practices. So this isn't just an abstract conversation, but you're walking away with like, I'm going to actually do something different in light of this conversation. So a couple practices. And the first one is put your identity before activity. I mentioned earlier this list of verses that speak to your identity. Your identity is now hidden in Christ. And so I really encourage you, if you've never done that exercise, go Google it. It'll give you a laundry list of verses to work through and just do the slow work. Don't hustle through it, but just begin internalizing, this is who I am in Christ, and receive that, not just in your head, but in your heart in a way that becomes like a settled conviction that shapes who you are and how you orient to literally everything happening around you.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
If I can add something to tie back to one of our previous episodes, I'm guessing, or at least it's occurring to me, that our view of God, or even our false sense of who God is probably going to also motivate our efforts. Like if we see God as a distant deity, we're going to, like that anxiety is going to produce efforts that aren't necessary. If we see God as a harsh critic, that's going to motivate efforts that, again, are unnecessary or out of line with what God actually wants for you. So, in addition to receiving your own identity, maybe checking or listening to that podcast that we did before, just ensuring that who you see God as is really who He is.
Yeah. I love that. I think one thing we say in our leadership intensives is, who is God and who am I in light of that?
Yeah, and that's such a good word, you guys. So this list of what's my identity in Christ, it reveals something about God and you. And the goal is to internalize both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, and often it needs to start with God because we sometimes have jacked up views of who God is, and then that jacks up our view of ourselves. So,
Adam, you don't say a lot of words, but when you do, it's brilliant.
Yeah. Another practice we would name is prayer before action. Katie, you mentioned this earlier, of this idea that when the day gets busy, when you have a lot of stuff on your plate, our temptation is to avoid going to prayer because we have too much to do, and maybe use that as a prompt. Anytime you feel too busy, that would be an indication that actually I'm even in more need of stopping to pray first, because I may run way out ahead, just like the dog that's bird hunting. So, it could be at the beginning of your day, it could be in the middle of the day, stopping before you do things. Maybe you do things as a family or as a couple, like before you're going to talk about finances or something just a tiny little stop to say, like, hey, we're just going to pray and ask God to keep us aligned.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
And
we really tried to do that as a staff in 2024. That was kind of our one thing we focused on as a staff was spirit dependence and prayer. And we tried to, as a practice, like just commit to pausing and praying before our meetings together. And it's fun to see how that has become rhythmic and habitual rather than like this thing that's new and hard to practice.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't always take, you don't always need like an hour, It's great if you have that time, but you can pause and pray really at any point. A third practice I would name is rest before work. So I talked about how our family tries to practice the Sabbath, and I think that's just this, whether it's an actual Sabbath practice once a week or just a moment to rest, can be one of the most countercultural ways I think we can live this out. Like resting before we work, taking a Sabbath, even if it's just once a month, not to get more out of the week or the month, but as a way of declaring my life is not upheld by my effort, it's upheld by God. And it's been my personal experience that in that space of rest, I actually learned to trust God more because I end up seeing how he's at work when I'm not doing anything.
That's a good word. Do you know that this is our 50th episode?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember before we started this having a fair amount of anxiety, like, hey, are we going to have anything to say? Will people even listen? This is going to...
Total flop. Will it be a flop?
So it's fun to be 50 episodes in and still talking about how to follow Jesus faithfully. It's been fun to partner with you guys in this work.
We haven't figured it out yet, apparently.
No. Well, I keep saying silly things that get us off track. But
It has been fun.
thanks for joining us today, you guys. Next time we're gonna look at another core conviction when it comes to multiplying disciples who live on mission in the world. And it's this: God cares about the who, not just the do. So we'll see you next time.
Praxis is recorded and produced at Crosspoint Community Church. You can find out more about the show and our church at crosspointwi.com. If you have any questions, comments, or have any suggestions for future topics, feel free to send us an email. Also, if you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.